quirkier side of life. The Todd Starnes Commentary.
A few weeks ago, a Wisconsin family discovered a baby deer abandoned by her mother. So the family took the tiny fawn to the good folks at the Society of St. Francis, an animal shelter in Kenosha. The shelter workers gave the deer food and water and a name, Giggles. But the day before Giggles was to be transferred to a wildlife reserve, the animal shelter was raided. Government agents spent days conducting ground and aerial surveillance, decked out in combat gear and armed with a search warrant. They had come for Giggles. The staff at St. Francis was held at bay as agents killed poor Giggles, dumping the tiny fawn in a body bag. The Department of Natural Resources defended the raid. They say wild animals are dangerous, but not nearly as dangerous as government agents playing out their Rambo fantasies in the woods of Wisconsin. Rest in peace, Giggles. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth proudly on AFR Talk. And as promised, a debate over the NSA programs that have been frequent news stories since the leaks by Edward Snowden and covered by journalist Glenn Greenwald. On the line now with us is our good friends Seton Motley, president of Less Government, and Ryan Mauro, National Security Advisor to the Clarion Project, clarionproject.org. And welcome, gentlemen. Great to be with you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Why don't we begin? I'm going to throw it to you, Seton. First question goes to why you think do the NSA programs need to be altered or ended or just left alone?
Well, I definitely think they need to be dramatically altered. I find it ridiculous that we're collecting 5 years worth of phone calls, emails, and texts under the guise of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and all these calls and emails and texts and instant messages are domestic to domestic. How is that justified under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act? The Fourth Amendment guarantees us from unreasonable searches and seizures. I find very few things more unreasonable than collecting multi-trillions of American-to-American phone calls without any precept or any pretense that this has anything to do with national security on a specific case-by-case basis.
Ryan?
Well, do I think that the program needs to be altered? I think we should always be looking at ways to improve programs, particularly when you have 44% of the population saying that they disagree with the NSA program. I'm part of the 50% that mostly agrees with it, but I want it to be improved if we can. Now, fundamentally, I think that there is a mischaracterization of the NSA program in the media and by Snowden, of course, himself. Basically, how this works is the NSA has the phone records but not the content of your conversations. So they have what number called what number, they have how long the conversation took place and when it took place. And that database exists because if you seize an al-Qaeda member's cell phone overseas, you want to know who called him in the United States. Previously, we didn't have that capability. And so you plug in the al-Qaeda member's phone into the database, and then you can see who called them. And then from there, if you want to wiretap someone, you still have to go through the warrant process. So I think that this database does make sense, and there's only 22 analysts that have the authority to use it.
Okay, now we've lost Seton for a moment, just Friday of technical difficulties, but in lieu of that, we'll play for you General Alexander after he said, "I didn't lie" at the Black Hat Conference earlier this week. Here is the head of the NSA program. Roll it.
Thank you for that. But I do think this is important for us to have this discussion because, in my opinion, what you quickly believe is that which is written in the press without looking at the facts. This is the greatest technical center of gravity in the world. I ask that you all look at those facts. Check that out. Read the congressional testimony. Look at what we're talking about here, because this is our nation's future.
All right. And Seaton, welcome back. I don't know if you heard Ryan's response, but pretty much detailed the way the information was collected, the limited access to it, and only if there is a warrant can you access that information.
Yeah, but they're getting warrants under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act to collect domestic intelligence. So the warrant thing doesn't do it for me. The FISA court doesn't do it for me. First of all, they don't. Second of all, they don't even have an arguer opposite the government in the court. It's the government going by themselves to the court and saying, "We want a warrant," which is why FISA court has basically become a rubber stamp for the government, because there's no one arguing the opposite side. Look, surveillance and building a case, you start specific and get broader. Meaning, I think Seaton Motley is a terrorist. So I need a warrant on Seaton Motley's specific phone calls. So you get a warrant and you look at Seaton Motley's specific phone calls, and he's been calling Crane Durham. So now we think Crane Durham's in on it, so you go and get another warrant specifically for Crane Durham. What they're doing at the NSA is precisely the opposite. They're collecting every single phone call and then working down from there. If you want to do that, I don't want the government to have it. They should not be building an NSA building 7 times larger than the Pentagon in Utah. They should have paid the companies, the private companies, to store it for them, and then they have to go specifically, case by case, individual by individual, go to a judge with Verizon there and say, or with AT&T there, or with whoever there, and say, we want this specific finite amount of data, and they have to convince a judge to get that specific finite amount of data. I don't want them warehousing every single phone call, email, and text for 5 years.
Ryan, are you concerned or troubled by the collection of that data in its form?
If it was happening, I'd be concerned about it, but that's not what we're talking about. Again, we're talking about the NSA database storing what number called what number, how long the phone call took place, when it took place, but not the actual content of the conversation. So they're not searching through your private conversation.
Wait a minute, Ryan. You're ignoring multiple leaks. You're ignoring leaks from Snowden. You're ignoring a report by Gerald Nadler, Democrat in New York, who walked out of a Friday night briefing several weeks ago, ashen-faced, saying low-level analysts on their own authority can listen to phone calls. Snowden said the same thing. Now we have this story in The Guardian this week that they're doing the same thing with emails and text messages and Google searches and web searches.
Well, they're saying that's not.
Hold on, Seaton, hold on, Seaton.
About
Allow him to respond. You just asked him a question about those reports, and Ryan, go ahead, respond.
Yeah, well, first of all, one of the things that we've seen throughout this controversy, and all sorts of controversies, such as, think about the Boston bombings reports, is that the initial reports are wrong. And the NSA is saying that those reports are not true, that they're collecting every single text and email. If they are, then obviously I'm going to have a very big problem with that. But I'm withholding judgment until we get all of the facts, and I don't think we need to jump the gun here. But think of it this way, in terms of the warrant. With the police, they often would subpoena the telephone companies in order to get that same data that the NSA has. And then from there, they would have to establish probable cause in order to get a warrant to wiretap someone. So the NSA is actually really not doing anything much different than what cops have been doing for decades now.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
How is it different, Seaton? Go ahead.
Snowden and Nadler said, my stupid ass could listen to any phone call I had in front of me.
What's that?
I'm sorry. Every phone call.
Snowden also is the one that said that he personally could tap into President Obama's private email if he had wanted to. This is a man that's prone to exaggeration. If you look at his interviews, he is trying to generate headlines. That doesn't mean he hasn't passed along some accurate information, but his characterization of this has been very, very overdramatic at times. And so I wouldn't just go solely on his word.
You're putting confidence into James Clapper, the head of the National Security Agency, who lied his face off to Ron Wyden on March 12th.
There's been
You really
few
wanna put
people
that much
more critical of
confidence in the
James
Obama
Clapper than
administration?
myself.
Hold on. You just asked about James Clapper and Ryan. Go ahead.
There's been a few people that have criticized James Clapper more than I have, particularly on this program. So I'm not a fan of James Clapper, but you still have to prove that what he's saying is false. When it is stated in front of Congress that
Hold
only
on,
22
Seton.
analysts have the authority
Seton,
to go
let
through
him
this
finish,
database,
then you'll get a chance.
you have to
Go
prove
ahead.
that that's wrong before you can make an accusation and say, oh, well, that's not true.
Go ahead, Seton.
Well, we already did. Clapper, Ron Wyden asked Clapper, are you collecting data on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans? And he said no. And then Snowden came out like a week later with the Verizon metadata collection. So he lied his face off right there, and it's been proven.
Okay.
So don't tell me we haven't proven Clapper's a liar. He's a liar.
Seton, and the backstory of that, which we discussed last week, was that Wyden had been briefed on that and knew the answer to that question before he asked Clapper. Just for full context, you can say, hey, he still lied. Absolutely. I got it.
He still lied.
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine. Thank you. So, Ryan, the issue of credibility with Clapper, do you think that extends? And Seton saying, hey, look, they're already lying, so why should we believe anything they say?
Well, because you're getting information from multiple parts of the NSA, and you have to think of it this way. Yes, James Clapper may not be the most credible DNI. I've said that countless times. But he's the one that said that the Muslim Brotherhood is a secular force. So I think he's not a credible force, but that's not the discussion. If he says that there are only 22 analysts that have the ability to go through this database and then potentially go get the information in order to get a warrant, you can't just automatically assume the worst. Show that that is incorrect, because you're making a very big accusation that the NSA is storing all of our electronic communications, and if you're talking to one of your friends, they could potentially just be going through it just for the heck of it.
Seton,
Well,
go ahead.
Not only has Snowden said you can do that, Nadler was briefed that people at Snowden's level can do it.
Okay.
So I'll given the broader context of the Obama administration passing fancy with the truth, I'm going to believe Nadler and Snowden more than I'm going to believe Clapper and the Obama administration.
Closing statements on the flip side of the break. They each get about 90 seconds to make their case. Seton Motley, Ryan Mauro, NSA debate, Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, AFR Talk.